Hi guys, this is Philippe Leefsma from Autodesk Developer Network, and today I'm going to show you how to get started with our View and Data web service. So first of all, get to that URL, the developer.autodesk.com. This is our new developer portal, and if you don't have an account, then you need to register, otherwise you can just log in. I'm going to log in with my account here, and once you're logged in, obviously, in that case, I already have application created, but if you don't have any apps created, you just have to create a new app. And this is going to allow you to get API credential. So I'm going to create a new app that I'm calling Demo View Data. The callback URL, it just you cannot leave that field empty, but it can be any valid URL. So or any just dummy URL as well. So let's just provide a dummy URL. And here I'm going to select a product. So as you can see, we have AutoCAD IO API in beta and the View and Data API service. So in that case, I'm going to generate keys for the View and Data API. And this is pretty straightforward. You can see the keys are generated automatically, and there is no approval, manual approval requested. And here you can see my consumer key and my consumer secret. I'm going to show you how to use those. So let's switch to another website, and we've got a lot of different tools that you can use to get started. One that is easy is the LMV Quick Start Guide. It's just a web page that takes you through all the various steps in order to get started with the API. By the way, while the site is loading, you can see here that you have links to the API documentation. So let me just show you how it looks like. And here is the web page for all our web services API. So in that case, the View and Data API. And here you can see you've got as well quick start guide on how to get started by using the View and Data API with the various steps I'm going to show you in a second. Authentication, and then the detailed reference for all those various APIs as well as the client API. So let's get back to our get started. So this is the quick start guide page. So you can see the step one is to try the viewer. I'm just not going to do this right now. The second step is to sign up. This is what I've just done by generating the access keys. And once you get your keys, you can get an access token by running, for example, the curl tool on your Mac or on your Windows. So on Mac, the curl is coming out of the box, but on Windows you have to install it separately. You just don't have necessarily to use that tool, but this is pretty convenient to generate an access token. So let's copy that line of code, that's command, and I'm going to put that in a terminal. Pasting that command line. So you can see here, if I run that command, obviously my consumer key and my consumer secret are not valid. So you can see that I'm getting an error message. So what I'm going to do now is replace the consumer key and the consumer secret by my actual credentials. So I'm just copying the consumer key here. Just scroll a bit. Here's the consumer key and my consumer secret, doing the same thing. Replacing that consumer secret with the actual one. And here we go. I should be able to generate, as you can see, a valid access token. So this token will allow me for a period of 1,799 seconds, which is about 30 minutes. This token will allow me to invoke the REST APIs and as well as load files inside the viewer. We can just copy this token and place it on our quick start guide. And while pressing authenticate, it will store the token inside the page, and then from now on I will be authorized to invoke the API on behalf of my credential for 30 minutes. So the next step is to show you how the REST API is working. So basically the API is split in two different areas. The first one is file management API, which is a REST API that it allows you to create what we call buckets in order to upload the models and store the files on the server. The second API is a JavaScript API that allows us to embed the viewer inside the web page and customize the behavior. Okay, so let's now create a bucket. So you can see here I can specify the name of the bucket, so let's say demo. But then you have to keep in mind that the bucket name needs to be unique across all the other buckets, even those created by other users of the service. So a good practice in order to avoid conflicts is to append the consumer key to your bucket name. And because this bucket name only supports lowercase string, I first need to convert that into a lowercase string. And then I'm going to define the retention policy. This field defines how long the files are being stored on the bucket, whether they are transient, so they are available for 24 hours, temporary for a month, and persistent until I decide to delete them. So let's try to create our bucket, and you can see here the policy, the response is successful, so the bucket has been created successfully. If I try to create the bucket another time, then you can see that case that I'm getting an error specifying that the bucket already exists. So the next step, this is an optional step. This step 5 allows you to retrieve information about an existing bucket. So this might be used to check first if a bucket exists prior to create it. So in case the bucket already exists, then you don't want to try to create the bucket of the same name. You can see in that case that if I provide the name of my bucket, the request is successful. If I provide some other name that does not exist, then in that case you can see that the bucket is not found. The next step illustrates is as well optional, illustrates how to get all the supported format by the service. So the service allows translation of many various file formats, Autodesk and non-Autodesk file formats. And this specific API returns all the currently supported file formats for the translation. So you can see here we've got inventor parts, we've got DWF, we've got all kind of neutral format like STL, PNG, and so on. We've got as well SolidWorks and a whole bunch of data formats that are supported by that viewing service. The next step is going to be to upload a file to the bucket. So here we have to specify our bucket name, and I'm going to select simple file on my disk to translate it. So I must have some really simple model somewhere here, and I'm just going to select a simple model so it doesn't take too much time to translate. Let's say the engine, DWF, and I'm going to upload that file to the selected bucket. You can see here the upload has been successful, and you can see the fields I get in my JSON reply. The next step again is optional, allows me to retrieve information about an existing object inside a bucket. So in that case I need to specify the name of the bucket and then the object key, which is the name of the file by default, but this doesn't have to be necessarily. When you upload files with your custom logic, then you can specify a different object key than the name of the file. And you can see here I'm getting a successful reply, which means that my object has been uploaded to my bucket correctly. The next step is to set references. So here this is as well an optional step, and this is used when you need to upload, for example, assemblies or Xref. You may upload first the parent assembly and then the child files, and then you will use the API to define which one is the master file and which one are the dependency files. So I'm not going to do that at the moment because it requires a little bit more setup, but you probably get the idea that is pretty simple. The next step is to encode the URN. So that's the string that we're going to pass to the viewer, and we don't directly pass the string under this form, the bucket name and then the object name, but we use an encoded form of that string. So now I'm going to paste, this is the ID of my file, as you can see here. It's built using the name of the object key and the bucket key. So I simply need to retrieve that URN, and then I'm going to encode that URN in base 64, and this is the string that we are going to use to identify that object and pass it to the viewer. So I'm going to copy that and paste it into that next field. So the next step, at this point the file has been uploaded to my bucket, but the translation to the viewable format has not been generated yet. So this step allows me to invoke a specific API that is going to translate the file to a viewable format, lightweight format that is going to be streamed on the web and loaded by the viewer. In case you are converting a large file, then you may want to check the translation status. So at this point the translation might already be complete, as you can see there. But if I was converting some other format or a bigger file, then this would take some time, and this API would allow me to monitor the progress of the translation. And so when the translation is successful and the success is 100%, then you are able to view the file again using the same URN. So this is going to load my engine model inside the viewer, and you can see my little model is already available for viewing. So let me show you how you can set up a very basic, very simple Node.js application with a client in order to view your files. I now switch to WebStorm. This is the development environment that I'm using for web projects. So this is not a free program, but I find it pretty good and pretty convenient to develop web applications. So if you're going to do some intensive web development, this is definitely the program that I recommend. So the sample I'm going to show you now is available from our GitHub repository. So you get to github.com/developer-autodesk, and here you can see a whole bunch of samples that we created to illustrate the use of our View and Data API and as well AutoCAD I/O. So the one that I'm going to show you right now is the Node, so the workflow Node.js View and Data API, and you can download that project on your side and start playing with it. It's pretty straightforward. Here are the setup and usage instruction, and we try to make it pretty detailed and easy to do, to get started very quickly. So I'm going to show you that project in more detail. The first thing I need to do is to fill up my credential. So I'm going to fill that up with the API credential I had previously. So that's my consumer key here. And my consumer secret. Okay, in case you need to test the viewer in staging, you can test the staging version of the viewer. So that's the version that is used for testing, and the only difference is that you have to append not developer.autodesk.com but developer-stg autodesk.com, and that will take you to the same page, except that is a staging version. So you have to request different pair of key for staging. That's just what it is. So let's get back to our sample. So I fill up the credentials for production, and I'm going to show you the content of the server.js. So you can see that's all the code that is required for serving the web pages. So here we're starting by importing some module. So this one manages the 5 icon, that's the little icon that appears on your web page. This one is my API, so I'm going to show you that in a second. So this links to that file. And Express is a pretty popular module for Node.js that allows you to very easily create server application. I'm going to create a new Express application, and I specify the application that it has to use. That specify directory here where my views are located whenever the URLs ends up with /node/demo. Then this line handle the 5 icon, and these lines link this URL. So whenever the URL is going to end up with API, then the calls are going to be redirected to that section of the code that is handling the API, the REST API for my side. Here I'm specifying the port to use to run my server on. So in that case, the server is going to use port 3000, but I could use any other free port on my machine. And I simply need to call listen to start the server. And that's pretty much all the code I need to do on the server side. So let's now take a look at the API here. So here we are going to import that credential file, and as well we need to import requests. So in order to generate a REST call from the server. So here you can see I've got a set of 2 REST API, one that generates the token for production and another one that generates the token for staging. So the code is pretty straightforward. It's simply sending a post request in order to generate the token. So you can see here the parameters. I've got the client ID, client secret, and the grant type that needs to be client credential. And here I'm simply sending the post request to the base URL, so as well defined in my credentials, and that's the authenticate section of the service. And I will simply return the whole response to my caller. And then the next thing is to implement the client. So if I switch here to this index.html, you can see the HTML code. So I'm going to change that to title of my page, Alien Viewer Demo. In that case, so I need to, I'm using jQuery, so I need to import that jQuery script. Here you can see the viewer staging. So in case you are testing in staging, you just need to swap between viewer production and viewer staging, because they are using different CSS styles and different API. You can see the only difference here is the developer-stg versus simply developer. So in that case, we're testing the production version. So here I'm including the CSS for production and as well the JavaScript Mignify API for the viewer. As well, I'm including a specific script that I created. It's a toolkit that allows you to simplify the code that you are writing for the viewer, and this is as well available on GitHub. So you can directly reference the script on GitHub instead of downloading it locally, so you're sure you are up to date with the latest version of that toolkit. And that's pretty much all we need. The viewer is going to take a div in order to render the model. So at least we need to create a simple div in our HTML page. And this is the code for the viewer here. So in that case, I'm going to replace as well the URN production. So that's the URN of our model. So I need to get back to the actual URN here that we had previously. So that's the identifier of our model. So I'm going to paste that URL here. And so this is the URN I was using for staging. And inside that page ready callback, I'm going to instantiate that object from my library. That's the viewer manager. So, and I'm going to pass it the token URL. So in that case, I'm going to invoke my API here. So it's going to invoke the API that is defined here in this API.js. So I need to update that as well to demo. I was changing the name of that sample. So when the viewer is going to load, it's going to invoke that token URL. So it's going to invoke my get token here in order to grab a valid token. And then I'm passing the div in which I want to render the model, and as well the environment. If it's staging, I need to pass Autodesk staging, otherwise it's Autodesk production. So in that case, I set that staging variable to false. And I will pass the URN, so I will invoke the load document method, passing the URN of my model that is there. And here I'm using a little extra feature. It's under the private namespace, but you might still use it. Just means that it might change at some point, but this is very unlikely. It means that if the URN is using a URL parameter named URN, then it will grab that value and store it inside that parameter. So I will be able to change models on my web page by specifying the URN inside the address. So I'll show you a demo of that later. And that's pretty much all is needed. You know, the viewer manager will load my document based on the token. So I can simply test that application in WebStorm and show you how it looks like. So I'm going to press run here, and it's going to run my server.js file, and you can see here the server is running on port 3000. So I can fire a browser and test my URL. So it's going to be localhost/node/demo, because that's the URL I specified. And here we should be able to see our engine model that gets loaded. Properties, I can click on various objects, entities, components inside my model and get the properties. I can explode that model, and I can do stuff with the views, zooming, panning, and so on. Alright, so as you can see, it's pretty easy to get started and get our viewer application with server client running. So at that point, the application is just running locally. So it's still a good thing, but it's not very exciting because nobody else can see my website or over the web. So I'm going to show you how to very easily deploy that basic Node.js application on a server. So to show you the deployment, I'm going to switch to my Windows machine because I've got it hooked with an Amazon Web Services account, and here I'm using the AWS Explorer. This is a little add-in for Visual Studio that allows me to very easily connect to my remote machines. So you can see here under the instances, those are my virtual instances running, and I'm going to connect to that one. Open that as a remote desktop. So it's pretty convenient because it keeps stored my passwords and stuff, so I don't have to type anything. And when I do that, I'm simply connecting using remote desktop to the virtual instance on which I'm going to deploy that Node.js sample. So in the meantime, you can see here the sample that I showed you previously has been automatically copied to my Dropbox account. And this Dropbox account as well is set up on my virtual machine. So if I go here inside my Dropbox account, I get to project, then this workflow, Node.js. So this is the project I just created, and I can simply copy that and put it locally on the server. So this is the project I just created, the demo project. And I need to rename that into demo because that's the it's going to be needed for the server. And I simply browse to the IIS section here of my machine, and I install inside that machine. I install something called IIS node. It's just a little module that runs on IIS and makes it very easy to deploy Node.js application hosted by IIS. So I encourage you to take a look. If you type IIS node on Google, then you will find immediately links to that stuff. So it's pretty slick stuff. I'm simply putting the demo directory inside this directory. And if you check inside here, you can see there is a web config, and this file simply describes how IIS is going to manage that that sample. So you don't really have to change anything here for a basic for this basic sample. And that's pretty much all I need to do. If I switch back, because my sample is called demo and has been placed inside this specific directory, which is served by IIS node. If I switch back to the browser here, and I'm typing this viewer.autodesk.io. So this URL has been mapped to this specific server. So if I type this URL, if I replace that, I also probably need to clear the cache at some point, because if I run the same sample from various locations, then I'm going to hit some CORS issue. So I'm going to clear the browsing data. Here we go. If I type that address, then you should see that my sample is up and running on the cloud. You can see here ADN viewer demo, and it will load my model. So pretty easy to have a client and server running using that approach. Okay, and to finish, I'm going to illustrate that URL parameter thing. So because I was hiding some extra code, I show you in the JavaScript client here. I have the possibility to type the URN and then provide the URN of a model that my viewer is going to load instead of that default model. But in the case of the sample here, I just have uploaded a single model. I just have a single model available. So I would need to do the workflow again and upload another file. So I'm going to use the same bucket than previously here, and I'm going to select another simple file here on my disk to create another viewable model. So I'm just rebuilding the workflow from before. I'm getting the the ID of my file here, and I need to encode that in base64. Take that string and translate the file. Check the translation status there. You can see there, so we need to wait for a sec that the translation happens. That's it, success 100%, so the file is ready for viewing. I can copy the URL here, and if I pass the URL here as parameter, then my viewer will load that specific model. That's the second model, and just check it out. If we are passing that URL here of the first model, then you can see instead of loading that model, then it will load the engine. So we've got the fully functional viewer, as you can see, fully functional application viewer. And that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. So just to sum it up, get to developer.autodesk.com, and from there you've got access to pretty much all the resources about the View and Data API. So you've got the API documentation, you've got the forum where you can post your questions, and as well the sample apps. So the sample apps will redirect you to AutoCAD.io or View and Data API samples, where you can see all the various samples that we created on our GitHub repository. Thank you, guys, and I hope you will have fun playing with this very cool API.